Welcome, everyone, for another episode of Monster Talks, based on a true story. I'm Matthew Baxter.
Hi, I'm Karen Stolzno.
And I'm Blake Smith.
Today, we're going to be talking about Serpent and the Rainbow. It's a 1988 American horror film directed by Wes Craven and starring Bill Pullman.
And a book.
And it is also a book. That's where the true story part comes in. It says right at the beginning of the film, inspired by a true story.
Loosely inspired.
Yeah, very loosely inspired. But I mean, the funny thing is that there was enough sort of there's enough in line with reality for them to be able to make that claim. I think. It's a little bit like what was it, Brotherhood of the Wolf, when we did that one. How it seemed like there were so many things that were just so crazy that it couldn't possibly be claimed to be true, but it was.
I have to say, I after having read the book and now watched the movie, I'm not sure I'd seen the movie before. I thought I had. I definitely rented it, but this movie did not seem at all familiar. Yet I'll tell you something else I was very surprised because my recollection was that the movie didn't really have much to do with the book, and actually it's got a lot to do with the book. Lots of stuff is made up, but there's a lot from the book in the movie. So.
Which is really surprising because the movie is quite outlandish.
It really is. So's the book. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's basically about this gentleman who's a Harvard anthropologist. In the movies, Dennis Allen is his name, and he is sort of approached by a pharmaceutical company to go check out these claims of a zombie potion that can make somebody appear to die and then come back from the dead, and they want to use it as kind of a super anesthetic. And it's all based on the story of a guy named Christoph who came back from the dead, and we can get more into that, but that's kind of how it starts. He goes down to Haiti, and it's craziness, and it's a very big time of political unrest, and there's so many factors in his crazy story, but of course,
it's a very subtle film.
yeah.
It's like the head,
or like a hammer nail in the scrotum. Yeah. I mean, it is very.
So the guy that comes back to life, his name is Christoph. Does that remind you of anything? It's like.
Yeah, well, so that's based on the story from the book. The story, which is, I think, the most famous real zombie story out there, of a fellow named Clairvius Narcisse. Now, in the movie, I believe he's been dead for a period of 7 years.
Right.
Or he had been dead or was buried 7 years prior, and had reappeared. And I guess he was in some kind of a psychiatric hospital under the care of a doctor. Her name was Dr. Marielle Duchamp. And she happens to be a very attractive young Haitian doctor. And so you have this kind of love story that's interwoven into the movie. And I thought, I can't believe it. Hollywood, of course, they have to have sex and romance in absolutely everything. But apparently there was some truth to that as well.
Sure, it's not explicitly stated in the book that they hook up, but boy, the real author's name is Wade Davis, and the sort of his experiences parallel the events of the movie in a lot of ways. A lot of the political stuff is not in the book, but that's
interesting.
The search for the powder or the medicine or the poison, it gets called a lot of things. That's legit. And then if it's not a love story, he's certainly the woman at the heart of that is her name is Rachel Beauvoir, and she eventually becomes Rachel Beauvoir Dominique. She gets married later, but
that's the loosely based part then.
Right, but she comes across in the book as being super competent, like incredibly familiar with the culture, and yet at the same time familiar with science. And in real life, she apparently was both a voodoo practitioner and an anthropologist. So she's she
would have been ideal.
So
she was amazing, apparently. So
she wasn't a psychiatrist, though, as she was portrayed in the movie.
No. A lot of people change jobs. So,
yeah. And I think that was in the movie too, one of the reasons why. I'm jumping further ahead, but he eventually does leave the country, and then he comes back for her as well. So presumably that's not in the book.
I guess let's stick to the movie and then we'll hop back to the book. I think it'd be
we're going to be jumping back and forth a lot with this one, I think, because of the parallels between the two. But so I think in the movie they do the political unrest is a large part of the movie, everything that's taking place. And I mean, there's an interesting backstory to the movie as well, behind the scenes information about what was going on in Haiti at the time.
Well, I think it worked really well for the movie for them to have this political unrest and have this sort of bad guy, paramilitary force and everything in there, because it really added to, I think, what a lot of Haitians have had to live with. It added to that whole just almost constant terror, in a sense, because these people were infiltrated both into their everyday lives through the political aspect of it, and through the sort of military law aspect of it, and then the religious aspect of their lives. So this all was so interwoven into these people's lives. I think it's interesting that the movie does take that on a bit. There were several other movies that came out around the same time that were all kind of going for the same idea, but as far as I know, this is the only one that really attacked the political and military side of it, like Serpent and the Rainbow. Because the other one that came out around the same time was The Believers. Did you see that one, Blake?
I did.
That one was I think the production quality was a little higher in that movie, but for some reason I think Serpent and the Rainbow is a little more remembered. And then there's what was it, Angel Heart with Robert De Niro and Mickey Rourke. Also had a bit of this going on, because Hollywood does tend to do that. They get similar movies kind of coming out around the same time because it's what's on people's minds. But because that was all within an 18-month span that they all came out. But this one really attacked some interesting things.
What we're talking about is the politics of Haiti at the time. It's covered a lot in the book, because in order to understand Haiti, you have to really understand that it's the only colonial nation that was colonized by Europe,
French,
that was able to kick out the colonizers and keep their independence. But at the same time, the people there's a lot of political corruption that comes out of that when they get autonomy. And I don't know exactly how much to believe, because in some ways, everything we see around the politics of Haiti comes from the West. So, I'm not on the ground. I don't really know what's happening there, but I do know that the father and son, Papa Doc, they call it Papa Doc Duvalier, and his son Baby Doc Duvalier, especially Baby Doc, took on a lot of the trappings of the voodoo religion, or voodoo, and I think
they really used that to oppress people. I mean, they were under a period of dictatorship for about 50 years.
And yet no other religion in history has been used to oppress people.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But the country has never fully recovered, even to this day, from what was taking place.
Yeah, and the movie is being filmed there, right? They film in Haiti, and it looks simultaneously beautiful and devastated. And I feel like maybe that's, apt, right? But I don't know. I've never been there, so.
Yeah, well, they really mistreated the people. There was a lot of violence and torture and killings. I think tens of thousands of people died under both regimes. Yeah, and that had only ended 1 year prior to the movie being filmed. So there was a coup d'etat, he'd been overthrown. And so it was only 1 year prior, I think it was 11 months later, that they started filming. And because there was still so much unrest there, and because of a bunch of other things that were happening in the country too, they ended up only filming for about 10 days in Haiti. And the rest of the movie was filmed in the Dominican Republic and other places, I think, back in America too, because part of it's set in Boston, where he meets with the pharmaceutical representative. But there was a lot of things that were going on behind the scenes when they filmed the movie. They had thousands of extras, and I think that they kept asking to be paid more. And I think they received several raises over a period of hours. And the people in the country too felt like the Hollywood wasn't taking their religion seriously. And so there was just a lot of anger that was directed at these people. And I mean, they were really in fear of their lives while they were shooting this. So it was really, again, paralleling what was taking place in the country with the storyline.
Yeah, I totally want to get more into that short period that they did film in Haiti in a little bit, and kind of go into a little more detail with how crazy it actually was. But the interesting thing about the movie is that it, to me, was kind of divided into two parts. You had the first portion of the movie was, definitely, had that metaphysical feel to it. But, you had Bill Pullman's character, was it Alan, Dennis Allen, acting very skeptical and everything about a lot of things, even though he had his jaguar spirit totem animal revealed to him earlier.
Yeah, I want to say something about that too.
Yeah.
I think because he was an ethnobotanist,
Right.
so a type of subset of archaeology, of anthropology. But I think in the movie, at least at first, he came across as so skeptical. And for all the anthropologists that I know, they wouldn't really be treating a culture or a belief system like that. I mean, he was just
Right.
really poo-pooing things at
You
the
get a lot
start.
of mocking sort of, yeah.
Yeah, and I just don't think that's how anthropologists typically are. But again, that was just part of his character. But
Right.
he came across very much as a kind of Indiana Jones type, I thought.
Well, I think
That he did.
that comes straight out of the book. So there's really two versions of this story. There's The Serpent and the Rainbow by Wade Davis, which is a popular book. And then there is Passage to Darkness, which is derived from his thesis, which is a much more academic book. And when I read when I read Serpent and the Rainbow, I had a lot of skepticism myself about it's such an adventure story. It makes me feel like, is this real? Am I supposed to believe all this? Because it does seem almost implausible, some of the things that happen. It opens up in South America, much like the film does. And he has lots of adventures there. And then he ends up getting on this search for this medicine, just like in the movie.
Does he find his totem animal?
He does not. He does not. He does have a lot of interesting adventures in South America, but that's the whole thing, though. It comes across like an adventure story, and a lot of the criticisms, especially contemporaneous to the book being released, were, I don't know if I believe this story because it's too much about this hero narrative, right? It's like it feels like this happened to me, and I kept thinking, well, it's he's going to go to Haiti in search of this Clairvius Narcisse, and the way the story is written, it seems like a lot of it is narcissism. Okay.
I shouldn't have taken a sip of coffee then when you said that.
I was waiting for that one. I was like, he's going to do it. I know he's going to use that one.
So
I'm very happy now. Thank you.
Yeah. But it is true. That is a legit criticism of the book, is that it's written like an adventure book. And you're not, it's really kind of hard to tell. Is this the work of a scientist trying to tell me, something about how zombies happen? Or is this an adventure story? And I don't want to spoil the ending, but there is a lot of interesting criticism around the outcome, like what the final sort of answer is. And sure. I ultimately come down as thinking Davis is telling a true story, but that it's been misinterpreted in the media, because he never says zombies are a real thing, or that there's a medicine that you can take that will make you a zombie. And in the movie, they sort of strip out the important detail. And there's this first part is you poison the victim or give them a toxin that simulates death. But the second part is really important. That is, you continue to drug them with something that's kind of like roofies. It's a local plant that grows there, and you give it to them, and it really does make them into pliable victims. The question is, how long could you really maintain that? I am super skeptical that you could keep somebody drugged up like this as a worker, which is kind of the way it's always portrayed, is they become zombie, they work on a sugar plantation. I don't know if you've ever seen anybody who is messed up on Ambien or one of those other kind of like medicines that sort of strip you of your will.
Just you.
So, but I guess I can't imagine that would be a useful condition to have your workers when you could just force them to work anyway, right?
It could cause brain damage as well, and ultimately kill the person. But I think that's what happened with Clairvius Narcisse too, where he was repeatedly given the drug to keep him in that state until the Bacor, the kind of evil sorcerer, died, and so then he wasn't having that administered to him anymore.
Yeah.
So
well, think about this with the movie. Think about how there was so much fear around the idea of having your life taken away. So, if you've got people that you have brought back, and now they're getting to see what it's like for maybe someone else. They just use one person as an example because the problem is this doesn't always work so well.
Exactly. You would probably you'd probably kill 99 out of 100 people you tried this on, right?
Right. So you get one person that it works on as an example to everyone else that you have enslaved. That this is your fate. So really they didn't have to zombify a whole bunch of people to work in the crops. They had to zombify one.
Right. They really need no, that's absolutely true. Yeah. They really don't need to have many successes to make this a powerful story.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't think they have to have any successes,
Well, here's the strange thing though, is when making this movie, Wes Craven actually visited a zombie clinic where they treated people that had been through these toxins. A zombie clinic?
Yeah, we don't know too much about that because even though he used that term, that could well have just been a psychiatric hospital because that is the skeptical explanation for what's really happening to these people. It's not this combination of the pufferfish toxin and the datura plant or all these other drugs in the zombie powder, that it's a matter of these are people with disabilities or these are people with some kind of mental illness or even cases of mistaken identity with these people who come back, like Clairvius Narcisse, who came back some 18 years after he'd first died. But I think we should talk a bit more about the movie and the powder, the zombie powder as well, and how gosh, I keep forgetting his name, but Dr. Allen, how he goes in search of this powder, and he comes across a very interesting character in the movie. His name's Mozart.
Yeah.
Is he Mozart in the
He's not.
book?
He's not Mozart in the book. But
he's Beethoven in the book.
The amazing thing to me is, again, this is one of those things where it's not exactly like in the book, but it does parallel a lot where he is offered a version of the powder at a low cost and it's crap. It's just
$500, and or he tests it on the goat.
The goat, yeah, that's made up for the movie, right? So, but and I enjoyed that in the film where he tested on the goat and then he makes a mark on the goat so he'll know, I'll pay you when I come back tomorrow when you bring the goat back to life now that it's dead, and then there's a different goat. So, but
yeah, it was a rat poison, I believe, is what he'd handed over.
Yeah,
and then he pretends to take it himself too,
and that's not how rat poison works, really. But anyway, that's a lot of there's more than one kind of rat poison. But I guess the thing is, it's the book in a large part hops back and forth between historical looks at both Haiti and the sort of the religion of Voodoo, and it also looks at his hunt for the real zombie powder, and his goal is to get it and mail it back to the labs in New England to get it tested and find out what's actually going on. And like you say, in the book and in the movie, it's supposed to be to find some sort of really effective, improved anesthetic. But he, it's when he's not successful or his hypotheses turn out to be wrong, his conclusion ultimately is that whatever's going on here, there may be medicinal basis for it, but it's largely a sociocultural religious thing. So
right. Well, when you look at some of the other ingredients in it as well, I mean, clearly there are some which have medical potency to them, and then others which have more of a kind of religious meaning. And you have crushed human bones and vines and other plants which don't necessarily have any proven effects, but I think it's just part of the ritual.
Yeah. And I again, exactly. And I think making it part of a ritual and having all these, hard to find components, it makes it a big deal. It's very theatrical.
Well, they have to travel out of Port-au-Prince, which is where the movie is mostly set, and they're out in the kind of a rural part of the country trying to locate all of these ingredients and it takes them days as well. So it's not just a matter of finding these things and mixing them. There's just a whole ceremony surrounding that as well.
And you mentioned using human body parts as part of the formulation. In the film, the Mozart character says very specifically, we're not using the body of a child, as though that would be abhorrent. And that's literally what they use in the book.
I guess a trigger warning here, content warning. They use, I think, the powdered crushed skull of an infant who'd died about 1 month before that. So, we know from the research we've done in skepticism over the years that often they will use the bones or body parts of children, in their rituals and spells and things like that. So, yeah, I think it's not something that's very tasteful to an American audience who's not familiar with everything that's kind of surrounding the religion. But it's interesting that they make a mention of that specifically.
Yeah. It also reminded me a little bit of which James Bond movie is it that's set in Haiti? Is that
I don't know.
Eyes of a Zombie?
No. Is it You Only Live? It's not You Only Live Twice. It was like Voodoo, James Bond, Baron Samedi. That's from it. But which Live and Let Die? Sorry, I should have remembered that. Anyway, in Live and Let Die, some of the same sort of the scene early in the movie, they have a ritual dancing, and it seems like people are being possessed very easily, and that it paralleled a lot of what they did in the film here. It reminded me of that very much.
Yeah, they had a lot of possession in the movie with people becoming possessed and eating glass and doing all kinds of things and human sacrifices, and that's not so much a part of voodoo. I mean,
so in the Psychic Mafia book by Lamar Keene, he talks about eating glass as being a magic trick that he uses for his spiritualism act, which I thought was as soon as I saw them eating glass, I was like, oh, that's first of all, I don't believe that's in the book.
We've seen it on stage at TAM, so
it's absolutely one of those old fakir tricks as well. So that kind of thing can be done.
Don't let it be monetized.
Mother fakirs. Anyway,
I do think it's interesting. Most of the representations of voodoo in this are that it's a kind of black magic thing, and there's human sacrifice, and you have this Macon guy, is it Petro, who is the police officer who keeps having these encounters with the doctor. And so everything that he does is interpreted as black magic, and there is quite a pejoration of the term bakor, which is the kind of evil sorcerer. But a lot of people who do practice voodoo today will use that term, and when they use it, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're evil or sorcerers or warlocks or anything like that. But I think it's interesting that towards the end of the movie, so we have that other fellow, and I'm trying to remember his name. Was Lucian?
Yes.
Yes.
He was kind of the white magic Hugan practitioner, and I just think it's interesting because some of the magic that he performs, especially at the end, is the same kind of magic that the Bakor uses, but it's seen as being good magic, white magic, rather than black magic.
It's all intention. What are you using it for? Is I think the big differentiation there. In a lot of cases, sometimes it's ingredients, but yeah.
I'm referring to specifically the nail in the groin scene, which we haven't really discussed. But the interrogations that they're
we'll get that nailed down soon enough, I think.
Yeah. I saw you both wince then.
Yeah, we'll do our best to take a swing at it, but sorry, Blake. Sorry, I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to step on your sack there with.
No. I was just thinking about what at the end of the film. So Paul Winfield plays Lucian.
Lucian, yeah.
And he is, by the end of the movie, it seems like he's appearing in visions as though he's under the control of the police chief, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was funny because I knew what's really going on is obviously there's a scorpion, or one of those little bugs in his ear from Star Trek. And that turned out to not be the case. But then they ended up having scorpions come out of people's mouths instead. And I was like, man, there's a lot of parallels between insects crawling out of things and mind control. But I wanted to say that Wade Davis pretty clearly makes a very mundane case that voodoo is the religion. It's not dark and evil. There's good and bad in all people, but that the religion itself is not bad or evil or dark intent, yet people can use it that way. And I thought, I mean, if anything, it comes across as one of the drier parts of the book, the way he describes the religion.
Right.
But at the same
they talk about the
time,
left-hand path and the right-hand path as well.
Yeah. And
positive intent and negative intent.
He's got the religion very dryly has the religion, but he says that there is a connected network of secret societies. They're almost, he never says the word mafia, but in every way he describes this network of people who know how to make the zombie powder as being some of the most powerful voodoo practitioners, and that they have a tremendous amount of socio-political power within the communities. They are the people you go to if you have a problem and need something fixed. You don't go to the police, you go to these people and they get stuff done.
Well, yeah, I think, sorry.
I was just going to also say, and that you would never turn someone into a zombie for no reason. It's almost always as a judgment for something. They've done something wrong. Now in the movie, it's like, if you make somebody mad, they'll turn you into a zombie.
Right.
But in the book, it's more like a big, like you have to be really bad to have it happen to you.
Right. And that's the case with Clavius Narcisse. That the claim is that he I think he'd had lots of children by different women, and then he wasn't taking care of them. So somehow he had done something wrong in a social sense, and that he was being punished for what he'd done. And that this was possibly by his brother.
Right. He was also in a land dispute with his brother. And the land in an agrarian society, the land is super important. So
yeah, but to this day, people do believe in zombification in Haiti to the point where it's actually illegal in a criminal sense. And there are some people who are very superstitious who will protect the corpses of their loved ones when they've just died before burial, so that they might even decapitate them or stab them in the neck. And that's their way of trying to protect them from becoming zombies, from being raised from the dead and turning them into zombies. But I wanted to say about voodoo as well, that there is really no kind of centralized power. Like you don't have a pope of voodoo or anything like that. You just have these different levels and different networks and people practicing it in their own way. And I think it's the same way that it's practiced here, Louisiana voodoo. And we did actually speak about this in MonsterTalk Live, the recent episode that we did, talking about voodoo in this country. And a lot of people would say it's diluted. I think it's really just the way that it has evolved in this country. But, in that video, Matt and I, we'd spoken about going to New Orleans, where we went to a conference a couple of years ago. The three of us were there, and how we went in search of a voodoo doll, like an authentic, real voodoo doll, and there it is. And
very
certainly
scary.
when you talk to people there, I do think a lot of people are kind of trying to keep up this pretense that there is that the voodoo is something to be scared of and fearful of, and that it's something that's very dangerous. And it's really, I think they're just trying to kind of keep people away from the core of it. And it's really, that there's not as much of a kind of a dark side to it the way it's practiced here anyway. And it's just a lot of kind of gobbledygook, I think, surrounding it. People making promises that they can do all kinds of things when they really can't.
I don't understand in some ways how that works. Like there's a whole ecosystem, like a financial ecosystem around voodoo accoutrement, all these little, doodads, gizmos, shirts, etc. I mean, if you look at these products, most of them are not handmade. They're made overseas. Like a lot of them, it'll be like, a voodoo doll, and you like look made in China. And it's
like souvenirs and
where in the
trinkets.
factory do they put the magic into it? I mean, it's like, are they gonna
That's
have
what you add yourself.
right? The magic was inside you all along. All along.
Didn't even need the doll.
I do need my ruby slippers though. So
Matt, you were going to talk a little bit about the behind the scenes or the things that happened during the filming of Serpent and the Rainbow.
Yeah. First, I do want to mention this whole Petro guy, how he appears to Dr. Allen when he's still in the Amazon,
right?
In the movie, and then he just becomes this, and he's got such an interesting face and everything. It's he was the perfect
toothy
actor.
grin, a toothy grin.
Yes, and I don't know if I know that Joe Bob Briggs is someone you're familiar with.
Oh yeah.
Did you happen to see the interview with Wes Craven done by Joe Bob Briggs?
I have seen them talk. I don't remember them talking about this, but I do remember Joe Bob talking about what happened with the pay situation, which sounds very scary.
Right. Well, in the sort of casting, was it Zach Smokai? Is that how you pronounce that?
I think so.
He he grew up in South Africa and had to witness his father being hanged, and he was tortured for a long time and everything. So when he was auditioning for this role, he basically told his life story to Wes Craven and said, I know these people. I know how they think. I know how they act. I can play this guy. And Wes Craven's like, you're hired.
Yeah.
Having
We
a
did
background
a
like
very
that.
good job. He was extremely intimidating and really just got into the
Got into
doctor's
his head.
brain. Yeah.
So
I think it was interesting when
excellent.
he returns to Boston and he's attending that dinner party, and how the Bakor possesses the woman, and she starts eating glass and leaps across him
and speaks
across
with
the
his
table.
voice. Yeah.
That was very scary, and he just continues to, as Matt said, just appear in his dreams, and he's just very, very powerful.
Which that's classic Wes Craven. He really loves messing around with dream ideas and dream sequences, and you can't quite tell whether it's like there's a whole section towards the end where it's on the beach, and he has a terrible dream, and you wake up, and then what happens is so unbelievable. You think he's still dreaming, and he's not. And
that was really well done. Yeah, it was the paramilitary police turning up again and taking him back to their torture headquarters. And
it was
right. They were literally under the jailhouse. That was a little on the nose, right? So
Yeah, it was very bizarre. And then just even when he comes in, he goes, "What did you dream about last night?" I mean, and it starts kind of reciting what he dreamt. That was creepy.
Yes,
very
it was.
creepy.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, the thing is like I said earlier, how the movie's kind of divided into two parts. The second part of the movie is so outrageous. I think that for me personally, it started losing me. With the first part of it, there were some outrageous parts, sure, but you were kind of suspending disbelief because of the fact that that a lot of this was taking place in people's minds, and it was fear driven and everything, so it was a little easier to go along with it. But by the end,
you're talking about where Dr. Allen basically becomes a zombie himself.
Well, no, even that, is still part of it. But when he comes back and is like having the showdown with Petro,
when they go full poltergeist,
right.
And I don't mean like they go full poltergeist like the film, as in spirits are flying around the room and everything. So yeah.
It was just, to me, that was going over the top a little too much.
It was a vulgar display. Is that what you're saying?
It was a vulgar display. It really was. Yes. I don't know, because you had this character, Bill Pullman. I thought his acting was over the top a lot of the time and everything, but then realizing that what they were dealing with in the real world behind the scenes, that it started to make a little more sense why his acting was so, I think, William Shatner-ish.
Well, you know, he from here he's going to go on and become president and save us from the aliens. So I
from the
mean,
aliens,
you
yeah.
know,
Says it's just a stepping stone.
right?
But you know, the thing is, you know, they had the horrible temperatures and everything down there. I mean, well, to start off, 2 years before the film was even released, Wes Craven and one of the producers, David Ladd, they actually went down to scout down in Haiti. And in the middle of the night, they were kind of dragged out to this ritualistic party, and he says it's really bizarre. You know, this woman came up to him, was, you know, took his wine glass away and started eating the glass, and then a live pig was produced and slaughtered just a few feet away from him. And he was just like, wow, this whole thing is bizarre that I'm having to see all this. Now, of course, the pig's blood went into these buckets and passed around for everyone to drink. But the priest let Craven and Ladd off the hook, which is huge, because if you don't drink, you know, the blood at these things, it's a severe punishment. So, but the priest let them off the hook, and that was, you know, endeared Haiti to him even more. But so.
Isn't there a case with one of the producers who said that he wanted to join the religion? And so I think a priest had.
Yeah, and that comes when they actually went down to do the filming.
Okay.
And then
so they were just starting to film.
Yes, that was supposed to be there for 30 days. They only lasted 11. And it just kind of started going crazy. I mean, by the time they started filming, you know, it was kind of in between revolutions, you know. It's like, you know, when you're in between work. So it was just deeply impoverished, and it was not a good place to be in a lot of ways. And they actually factored that in, thought that's really going to be the perfect setting, you know, is to have this kind of look down there. But they thought, oh, there's also going to be lots of cheap labor and plenty of extras. But there was so much volatility and everything, and unsanitary conditions, and the brutal, unrelenting heat, that it just started really getting difficulty. Now, they had to get the protection of the local military. They had to appease the local religious leaders. And
imagine anytime you're working in a country in those circumstances, appeasement's largely going to be big outlays of cash.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's
especially
not specific.
From wealthy Americans.
Right. That's not just Haiti. That's all over. So yeah.
Well,
but then it got to that point at about 10 or 11 days, where the local government said, look, we can't guarantee your safety any longer. We can't protect you. So that was the point where they ended up leaving. And I wonder how they left too, because that in of itself would have been dangerous.
They actually took the prop Pan Am plane. They took that and flew out. That's the story anyway. But but a lot happened in those 11 days. They you remember in The Exorcist, where they actually had a priest come to the set and bless the set and everything, because they thought there were, you know, demons there. Same thing. They had a local, you know, a practitioner bless the crew and everything, and grant them protection from evil spirits. Much like The Exorcist, it didn't work. It's basically on day one, the co-writer for the screenplay, Richard Maxwell, he kind of lost his mind. He, like Karen was saying, he said he wanted to become a practitioner, and the practitioner said, "And so you shall." That's the last thing he remembers.
For like 4 days. Apparently he was shipped back to the States, and didn't recognize his wife or his kids, and then just kind of snapped out of it and couldn't remember anything.
Couldn't remember anything. The last thing he
amnesia.
Yeah, last thing he remembered was that practitioner saying, "And so you shall." That's the last thing he remembered, weeks after being back in the States. So yeah, he didn't recognize his family. They found him in his room when he didn't show up. They kind of, you know, stormed into his room and found him half naked and belligerent.
But was this a publicity stunt? Was this just part of the promotion for the movie and all the treacherous things that happened to them in filming it? Or
I could find no interviews with Richard Maxwell about
so
this.
He
No
didn't
comments.
return to the project?
Nothing. He did not return to the project, but there is no, other than Wes Craven saying this, I can find no track record that this actually did happen. Because I mean, he would have been taken to a doctor and seen to, and there would have been some sort of, well, what did the doctor say was wrong with him,
But that's a really good point, I think, to discuss the fact that most of this is anecdotal, whether it's the filming of the movie or whether it's
True.
Zombies and claims surrounding this. I mean, we're hearing and reading about a lot of anecdotes, but not seeing much evidence for what's happened.
Even within the context of reading the book, which I was reading pretty critically, there's not a lot to say that this really happened. I wasn't even sure if Rachel Beauvoir was a real person.
Right.
Like, I was really skeptical, honestly. She seemed so perfect and everything. And like a lot of the things that happened seemed so much high adventure. I just couldn't. I was thinking he could have, like, one of the critiques I read was like, there's no reason he couldn't have just read all the books. All this could have been read in the library at his university.
He could have just gone online.
Right. Well, not online, but he could have, like, a lot of the things he writes about are historical. A lot of things he writes about are things that would be like from the 1920s, when you start having people there was an American occupation of Haiti, and a lot of people who served there left and then wrote books about it. And so there's lots of material.
And then you had a lot of tourists going to Haiti as well, and coming back and relaying stories of
and
lots of missionaries. And
when you go to Haiti back then, I don't know how it is now, it's probably kind of the same. You can go see these practices, these religious practices, by paying a fee, and it's like a tourist thing. It's a legitimate display, but they know that they're performing for tourists, right? And that's what there's an episode of the TV show In Search Of about this, and there's a chapter about it in the Serpent and the Rainbow book, and it's almost identical, because it's naming all the players, it's naming all the things, it's naming all the the steps, the beliefs, the deities, in a very clinical and Wikipedia entry kind of way. And then the history is not super deep. Like the Duvaliers, the leadership don't really show up to like the very end of the book, and even so, only as a little light mention. But if you'd been in the United States in 1984 and we're having an adventure, it's almost impossible that you wouldn't mention the name Ronald Reagan, because it would be there. Like, I mean, his name was everywhere. The Duvaliers were everywhere, but they hardly ever show up in the book. And so for them to show up so substantially in the movie and for him to take an even more active role. Like in the book, he is an observer, and in the movie, he's definitely a participant, right? I mean,
he's the star.
He's the star, right? So, there's some pretty major differences. The book, I found it very suspicious, but ultimately, I think it's legit. The movie has some of the same elements in it, but no, that's not. It veers wildly off into magical nonsense stuff. So
yeah, which is great fun for a movie. But like Karen was saying, what of the stories about these 11 days in Haiti is going to be publicity stunts,
right?
Or propaganda for the movie. You had Bill Pullman claiming that he saw a green cow that had television screens for eyes. Another crew member.
Happens.
Yeah. I mean, it's how I'm seeing you guys right now. But I can't see green.
Excuse me, sorry.
I can't see green because of chroma key. But the thing is, you've got another crew member who saw supposedly this long dead general on horseback who arrived and asked him to hand over the color blue. But and then Wes Craven at this point, because everybody other than Wes Craven fell ill, and he's like, we are cursed. We're cursed, and the superstitions were kind of setting in at that point.
It could have, as you say, could have absolutely just been natural factors, a climate that they weren't used to, food that they weren't used to, and just the threat of the political unrest. All of these things, I think, would have really destabilized them.
Well, Paul Winfield was one of the few down there that wasn't kind of falling for the superstition of it all. In fact, he was like, where it was unbelievably hot. We're all living in filth. it's only natural for our bodies to turn against us. And some people are going to see things, other people are going to have sudden vomiting fits. And so he was kind of the Max von Sydow of the whole thing. But then the extras went on strike and were demanding more money. They had their pay doubled multiple times. And
almost coming up to a full $1 per hour.
Yeah.
Well, wasn't
it
Wes
was
Craven saying
97 cents?
Yeah. So,
wasn't Wes Craven saying as well that they had enlisted, I think, to begin with, it might have been hundreds of people, and then just more people just throngs of people were watching them doing the filming, and they just kept kind of joining the procession and getting involved
demanding
in
to be paid, and
getting involved in the scenes like the funeral procession and just all of the other activities, and so they were just kind of
But there was a couple of times when they would make these demands that they would actually surround everyone and threaten to stone them, or they actually, in cases, did start throwing stones, which stoning is a very popular way of execution, I guess you'd say, down there. So they started realizing just how dangerous it was. So they, the next day, they left Haiti, and they filmed a scene at the airport, and then they actually hopped on the prop plane to get out of Dodge. So,
and when you say prop plane, you don't mean a plane with props. You mean
the Pan Am.
Right.
Yeah. So apparently some of the areas too where they'd gone and prepared the zombie powder, that those were filmed in the Dominican Republic as well, because the real places in Haiti were too sacred to be filmed to take a filming crew there. And
but they also said that the one place in Haiti was the waterfall cathedral.
I think it was
the Waterfall Cathedral they talked about.
I guess that they were going to film at the one in Haiti, but it was far too remote, and also they said it was decimated. So I don't really know what the truth about that is, but that was two of the reasons.
Combination of things.
Yeah, it's a very beautiful scene in the movie, but my goodness, their candle budget must have been enormous. I mean, there's so many, everything's covered in wax, and there's just candles everywhere. And, and it's funny because in that scene, they're sleeping, everybody's just asleep on the ground, and you don't know why exactly.
They're in a trance of some kind.
Yeah. It's just a little peculiar.
Ritual.
So, I mean, I think they just wanted it to seem alien, they wanted it to seem disconcerting. Now, Pullman is supposed to have, like, at the beginning of the movie, he's like supposed to have walked 40 miles through the South American jungle or something.
The Amazon,
So, for him to spend the night in the jungle there would be no big deal. So, yeah.
Easy peasy.
Indiana Jones,
That's right. So, I don't. Davis got a lot of criticism about the book, but the criticism was largely, "Hey, this is too much of an adventure book, not the academic thing we expected from you as a student, as a botanist, etc." And the only big criticism that I was able to dig up was from the people that he consulted with around the chemistry. And their argument was that I always mess this up, tetrodotoxin or tetrodotoxin. Anyway, the pufferfish poison. It's like, it's not able to do what he said, right? That it doesn't behave that way. Now, his argument was, that's not what I was saying. That I was saying that it is an ingredient, and these are the effects that it has, and they parallel some of the effects of zombies. I'm not saying that this alone is what's happening, right? And so, I
that's
kind
the
of
first
agree.
place my mind goes is it's one ingredient.
Yes,
you don't give someone a chocolate chip cookie and say, here's an egg.
Exactly.
It's going to create the same effect as you eating this chocolate chip
exactly.
cookie.
No, and I think yep.
I think it's also the element of him being an anthropologist and observing these things, not necessarily, participating in them, but saying this is what's done, and here is the folklore, and this is what I was told, this is what I found out, rather than him saying this is exactly what it is.
Right. And again, I don't think it would be very easy to read the headlines, because the headlines around this book were basically science finds cause of zombies, and it's the puffer fish. That's what it is.
But that's a great headline, though.
It is a great headline. Yeah, it's
because
not
they
what
did the
book
same thing with
says.
bath salts. So
yeah, exactly. So I mean, I think a lot of the retorts were actually responding to newspaper stories, not to what's actually in the book. And so, I'd say the book's worth reading. It is, adventure. I mean, and it tells you a lot of interesting things. It's not like the movie.
We were really looking forward to this episode because as Karen and I were watching the movie, we're like, oh, I can't wait to hear what Blake has to say about this, on what the book says. And this is a lot of fun for us to get to kind of hear what you felt about it, because there is so much about, Wade Davis and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it does sound like they just kind of missed the point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're making a horror movie, and it's not a horror book. I think that's one of the challenges. And the book doesn't have a villain in it. I mean, the villain is, it's the challenge is him versus the culture of, can he get accepted enough into this secret culture to be provided what he needs to get the answer. And when he ultimately gets the answer, it's not anything that can be produced in a lab, because it's a sociocultural effect. It's not, it's a magic thing. I mean, it's literally social, and there's some chemistry, but it's mostly social and religious magic. And you can't bottle that.
So. Definitely that element of belief as well. You take those same ingredients and put that in the context of American pharmaceuticals.
Right.
It's absolutely not going to work. But within the context of that culture and the belief surrounding that, then that could easily be very potent.
You're taking out that religious frenzy, that goes along with it, and which is, a big component of walking on coals and eating glass.
Yes,
yes. Because before you can do any of those things, you have to believe that you can. There's a trick to it, and the problem is if you go walking on coals without believing that you can, you make mistakes in that technique and the trick, and you end up burning yourself, and that reinforces the whole idea that it's dangerous to do that.
But also that communal reinforcement too, when you're attending a ritual and you've got people who are egging you on and participating in it as well. I mean, it's very intoxicating.
Yeah. So the reason these people don't bleed, the reason, that they're not getting burned, the reason all these things are happening is because they're being possessed by these spirits. So when and they believe that, so you can't really, bottle that. You can't bottle that kind of psychological power.
But I think
there's a lot of that goes with the whole zombie thing. You've got that suggestion,
you do see elements of that in religions in this country too. As we were watching the movie, we were talking about being slain in the spirit, and Pentecostal churches and the different practices of glossolalia, speaking in tongues, and all those kinds of things. I mean, there are absolutely shades of that. Snake handling. Drinking strychnine, things like that. So, I mean, it's not completely alien to some parts of the American culture too. So we can see how it can really play out with humans in general. It's not just people from Haiti who practice voodoo.
So you can read more about all of these things in Karen Stolznow's great book, God Bless America.
So
thank you.
So Wade Davis's book, The Serpent and the Rainbow, is like, it's not entirely academic. It's got some of that in it, and it's got a lot of adventure.
And that's why he has the two books as well.
Exactly.
He's got the kind of academic version and then the popular trade version.
But with the film, would you say it's sort of lower brow entertainment? Would you not say that? You wouldn't say that.
Am I missing a pun?
Lower brow.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So we can just cut that out. That's okay. Unlike
my
wife,
we don't have to put
that.
So many kind of
I just thought you had an Australian accent for a moment. That's all.
Yeah. I should say too that we did talk about this topic, to mention again that we talked about this in the recent MonsterTalk Live episode on zombies, where we talk a lot more about Clavius Narcisse and zombies and voodoo culture. So I think we didn't want to repeat ourselves too much. So if you'd like to hear more about that, do check out that episode as well.
And thanks for taking the time to read the book, Blake. We do appreciate that.
It's been on my to-do list for a long time. So it was really great to have the impetus to knock it over the finish line. So
I think a lot of people talk about the book without actually having read it, and that's a
fact.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one that is difficult to get away with that. You really do, I think, need to have a good knowledge of what the book says and what the critics say, so you can kind of parse things for yourself. But what do we think? How did Serpent and the Rainbow, the film, do in terms of being crazy and entertaining, and at the same time adhering to some of the truths? And we're talking comparatively with all these movies.
Probably 60% of the events in the film, like maybe the first 60% of the first 2/3 of the movie is based on real things that happen. It's a lot of math, but
I think it's enough. I think it's enough to say that the movie is loosely based on the book. I really do.
It is very loosely based. As soon as they start going into explicit supernatural territory, and that's off into fantasy at that point. But
did they nail it?
Oh, they nailed it hard. They really did.
Yeah, in the scrotum, yeah.
Really hammering that point there.
Did that chair remind you of the one from Shocker? I thought
yes.
It really did to me. It was almost like a cameo.
The way it chased him.
But it also reminded me of the wheelchair in
the Changeling. Yes.
So
I love the arms coming out right towards the end out of the
prison.
Oh yeah, it was like Mr. Fantastic been turned into a zombie. Yeah, that was actually I thought genuinely creepy. It really was.
It was. Yeah.
So,
but not in the book. Not in that book.
It is not in the book.
But when you do, if anybody's watching this and they decide they want to go see this movie, you got to check out Bill Pullman or his stuntman's fantastic Jackie Chan moves. There's some really good moves that he pulls off when he's doing some of these escapes and fights and stuff.
Shocking and peculiar people flying across the room horizontally.
Yeah.
I'm assuming there's a wire or something. I don't know. There's some nutty stuff in here.
And
I
it's
really
and I'm telling you guys, you get involved in voodoo and you'll be able to do that.
I'll be able to do all these things, right?
It's definitely worth watching, and the book is definitely worth reading. So
I agree. So what's next?
Ooh.
Well, so next month for Monster Talk Live, our topic is seances. Very broad topic. And then
it's gonna be a fun one. I can't wait.
It will. And then to be followed by, based on a true story, The Quiet Ones.
That's
right.
The okay,
Philip
cool.
experiment.
I
think it's fun to have two kind of connected topics for the live shows and for Dotes as well.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know anything about the Philip experiment, you're really going to enjoy this next Dotes, because it's a crazy story. And so the Quiet Ones.
I believe that the Philip head screwdriver and the Philip experiment are both Canadian. So
it all comes together.
That's right.
Like Wade Davis. Yep. There we go.
Yes.
Vicious
fastened
cycle.
It together quite well. So yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I personally have conducted many seances, and also conducted sort of Philip experiments over probably a good 5-6 year period.
Lots to talk about.
Hundreds.
You could do like a drag show as a musical act, a seance.
There you go.
It's your next gig.
Blake can produce you.
Yep.
And on that note,
you have to strike the right ambiance for that, though.
That's right.
Let's end this. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've got lots of episodes of Monster Talk, the regular podcast coming out soon as well, and lots of things happening, right, guys?
Yep, absolutely. Like, subscribe, comment, all those things actually do help. And definitely.
And give us money at patreon.com/MonsterTalk.
Yep, you went right where I was going. Good job.
All right,
all right, everybody.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.